Racism in the United States remains a persistent and painful reality. While the country has made strides in addressing civil rights over the decades, many cities continue to grapple with legacies of exclusion, hate, and systemic injustice. In this video, we examine 10 American cities where racism has either historically flourished or remains a serious contemporary issue. These locations have been identified based on documented hate crimes, segregation history, racially motivated incidents, and systemic inequalities. Some of these cities may surprise you. If you care about justice and truth, make sure to subscribe to Global Lens and turn on notifications for more globally important insights. Number 10. Berkeley, California. Berkeley is known for its liberal activism and role in the free speech movement of the 1960s, but recent developments have challenged the city's reputation as a haven of inclusivity. Since late 2023, UC Berkeley has faced intense scrutiny over a surge in anti-Semitic incidents. Jewish students have reported being harassed during campus protests related to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and several buildings were vandalized with hateful graffiti. The U.S. Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights launched an investigation into whether UC Berkeley is providing a safe environment for Jewish students in compliance with Title VI of the Civil Rights Act. The controversy highlights the fine line between political expression and hate speech, even on campuses known for free thought. This shift has raised broader questions about whether progressive communities can become blind to exclusion within their own ranks. In addition to campus issues, Berkeley has seen debates over housing equity and racial gaps in student admissions. Black and Latino students remain underrepresented, especially in STEM programs. Critics argue that high-performing school districts and rising property values in the region contribute to exclusionary trends that disproportionately impact communities of color. Berkeley, once considered a national model for campus equality, is now being cited in debates over rising hate speech and ideological extremism in academic institutions. Its challenges reflect how even progressive cities must continually interrogate their own practices. Number 9. Bellingham, Washington. Bellingham's tranquil setting masks a darker historical and contemporary reality. In 1907, the city made national headlines during the Bellingham riots, when hundreds of white laborers violently expelled South Asian immigrants, mostly Sikhs, from local lumber mills. The workers were accused of taking jobs from white residents, a sentiment that turned into coordinated mob violence. Fast forward to 2023, and Bellingham was again in the news when 4 teenagers were arrested for allegedly assaulting an Asian man in a hate crime. Surveillance footage confirmed the attackers used racial slurs and physically beat the victim while following him home from work. Bellingham's racial demographics remain relatively homogeneous, with more than 75% of the population identifying as white. Asian Americans comprise just over 6%, and Black residents less than 2%. Activists in the area continue to report that hate crimes go underreported, and that many victims fear retaliation or inaction by law enforcement. The city has launched public education campaigns and increased school-based anti-bias training, but many residents say these efforts lack urgency and institutional backing. Racially motivated incidents in surrounding Whatcom County further complicate reform efforts. In 2022, the NAACP's local chapter raised concerns over the city's police department response times and training in racially charged encounters. Bellingham serves as a reminder that past racial trauma can still echo in modern events, and that progressive branding alone is not enough to erase underlying tensions. Number 8. Utqiagvik, Barrow, Alaska. Utqiagvik, the northernmost city in the United States, offers a unique racial narrative. Predominantly Native Alaskan, it represents one of the few communities where white residents make up a minority, just over 21%. Yet racial tensions persist, rooted in a long history of colonization, cultural suppression, and economic exploitation. Historically, white settlers and missionaries imposed Western education systems and disrupted traditional subsistence lifestyles. These actions left deep social and psychological scars, which many Native Alaskans say are still present in community dynamics. In recent years, reports have surfaced of white students being harassed in public schools and of informal exclusionary practices within community events and public institutions. While some argue this reflects justified resentment from generations of cultural displacement, others see it as a reversal of the traditional racism narrative. Local schools and civic groups have introduced reconciliation workshops and heritage programs to build bridges, but progress is slow. A 2021 study by the Alaska Justice Center found disparities in educational outcomes and law enforcement engagement between native and non-native residents in North Slope Borough. Though the city receives oil revenues that help fund social programs, access to health care, addiction treatment, and housing remains inequitable. Utqiagvik illustrates how historical injustices can invert traditional racial hierarchies and foster new, complex tensions that defy binary frameworks. It challenges assumptions about who holds power in predominantly non-white spaces and raises questions about cultural preservation versus integration. Number 7. Honolulu, Hawaii. Despite its image as a tropical melting pot, Honolulu has a complex racial landscape marked by systemic inequalities, especially for Native Hawaiians. They comprise just under 10% of the city's population, but more than 28% of its homeless, according to state reports. Native Hawaiians also face disproportionately high rates of incarceration, poverty, and poor health outcomes. A study by the Office of Hawaiian Affairs found that Native Hawaiians are more likely to experience discrimination in the housing and labor markets. Additionally, over 1/4 of missing girls in Hawaii are Native Hawaiian, an alarming statistic that points to deeper vulnerabilities and lack of institutional support. Cultural tourism often romanticizes Hawaiian identity while sidelining indigenous struggles. Land development for resorts and luxury housing has displaced Native communities, exacerbating generational trauma. Advocacy groups are demanding land restitution, enhanced political representation, and equitable access to education and healthcare. The state's Department of Education reported in 2022 that Native Hawaiian students had the highest dropout rates and the lowest average standardized test scores among all ethnic groups. Honolulu's struggles are not about overt racial hostility, but about embedded neglect. While efforts such as Kanaka Maoli educational programs and Native cultural preservation laws are gaining ground, the gap remains wide. Honolulu's contradictions are emblematic of how representation does not always equate to power. It underscores that visibility must be paired with systemic redress. Number 6. Glendale, California. Once a notorious sundown town, Glendale prohibited Black residents from remaining in the city after dark through intimidation and violence well into the mid-20th century. Although its population has diversified somewhat, Black residents today still make up less than 2% of the city's population, a stark contrast to the nearly 63% white population. Historical archives confirm that Glendale hosted multiple Ku Klux Klan rallies, and the American Nazi Party operated out of nearby areas in the 1970s. These legacies left psychological scars that continue to shape perceptions of Glendale as unwelcoming to minorities. In recent years, the city has acknowledged its past and issued formal apologies. In 2020, Glendale passed a resolution recognizing its history of racial exclusion and pledged to create policies for diversity and equity. Yet community advocates argue that these symbolic gestures have not been matched with adequate funding for housing, education, or minority entrepreneurship. The local school district reports ongoing racial disparities in graduation rates and disciplinary actions. Meanwhile, residents of color say racial profiling remains a problem in Glendale's retail and residential neighborhoods. Glendale demonstrates how the residue of historic racism persists in structural inequality and cultural memory. Acknowledgement is just a start. Measurable progress is still required. Number 5. Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. This city has struggled for decades with the legacy of being a hotspot for the Aryan Nations, a white supremacist group that established its headquarters nearby in Hayden Lake. Throughout the 1980s and 90s, Coeur d'Alene became a symbol of organized hate, drawing national attention and protest. While legal actions in the early 2000s dismantled the Aryan Nation's infrastructure, recent hate crimes and racial harassment, such as a 2024 incident involving Black high school athletes targeted with slurs, suggest that extremism still simmers beneath the surface. Local anti-racism groups have emerged, but they often face pushback from residents who view these efforts as political overreach. Law enforcement has stepped up monitoring of hate groups, yet accountability remains uneven. The city's demographic makeup is still over 90% white, and minorities often report feeling like outsiders. Housing discrimination complaints, particularly against immigrants and people of color, have increased. Coeur d'Alene's attempt to rebrand itself as a resort and retirement destination clashes with the unresolved issues of its past. Public perception, especially among marginalized communities, has yet to fully shift. Number 4. Grants Pass, Oregon. Grants Pass is another former sundown town whose racial makeup today reflects its exclusionary past. Black residents make up less than 1% of the population. In 2021 and 2022, multiple reports of white supremacist flyers being distributed around town rekindled fears about hate group activity. Anti-racist protests have faced hostile counter-protests, with some demonstrators reporting intimidation. The Southern Poverty Law Center has listed organizations in the region as having ties to extremist ideologies. In 2023, a local judge ruled against city ordinances that targeted homeless encampments, citing disproportionate effects on marginalized populations, including Native and Black residents. Critics argued that the city's policies criminalized poverty and reinforced social division. Despite efforts by some community leaders to foster inclusivity, like town halls and diversity-focused art events, opposition remains strong among more conservative residents. Grants Pass illustrates how systemic racism persists in policy, not just rhetoric. Number 3. Charleston, South Carolina. As a major port in the transatlantic slave trade, Charleston's legacy of racial injustice runs deep. The city has sites such as the Old Slave Mart Museum that preserve the history, but systemic inequality remains palpable. In 2015, the Emmanuel AME Church Massacre, where 9 Black worshippers were killed by a white supremacist, shocked the nation and renewed discussions about racial violence in the South. Charleston officials removed Confederate symbols, but racial disparities in policing and housing remain stark. According to a 2022 city report, Black residents are more than twice as likely to be stopped by police, and less than 20% of local Black families own their homes compared to over 60% of white families. School segregation has also persisted due to neighborhood zoning. Charleston's historical beauty cannot be separated from its racial past. Tourism brochures often gloss over this tension, but grassroots organizations have amplified marginalized voices through education and advocacy. Number 2. Boston, Massachusetts. Despite its reputation as a hub for academia and progressivism, Boston has long struggled with race relations. A 2017 survey by the Boston Globe revealed that the median net worth of Black families in the city was just $8 compared to $247,500 for white families. This staggering gap is a result of generations of exclusion from home ownership and economic opportunity. Incidents of racism in sports, particularly at Fenway Park, have gained national attention. Black athletes have reported slurs from fans, prompting public outcry and promises of reform. Housing discrimination, school segregation, and lack of diversity in city government remain ongoing challenges. In 2023, a coalition of civil rights groups sued the city for failing to meet equity benchmarks in public contracting. Boston's reputation is evolving, especially with the election of a more diverse city council. But historical wounds continue to shape public perception, particularly among African American communities. Number 1. Albuquerque, New Mexico. In 2022, Albuquerque faced a crisis that revealed deep undercurrents of Islamophobia. 4 Muslim men were murdered over the span of just 10 days. Although the suspect was later revealed to be a Muslim man himself, the initial wave of fear and assumptions prompted widespread panic and xenophobia. Muslim-owned businesses temporarily shut down. Women who wore hijabs reported feeling unsafe. Social media brimmed with anti-Muslim rhetoric, and local mosques increased security. These murders occurred in a city that prides itself on diversity, with significant Hispanic and Native American populations. Yet the events exposed how quickly bias can surface under stress. Even after the suspect's arrest, many in the Muslim community felt scapegoated. Community leaders have since called for educational campaigns and stronger anti-hate crime legislation. Albuquerque police now coordinate more closely with civil rights groups, but trust remains fragile. The incident highlighted how dangerous assumptions and systemic fear can isolate entire communities. Albuquerque remains a cautionary tale of how fast inclusion can unravel when racism, whether external or internal, takes root. These cities each carry their own histories and present-day challenges. Racism does not exist in a vacuum, nor is it confined to one part of the country. From coastal enclaves to heartland towns, it is embedded in structures, cultures, and legacies. But exposure brings awareness, and awareness opens the door to change. If you found this video insightful, please like, share, and subscribe to Global Lens. Turn on notifications so you never miss a story that matters. Let's continue exploring the truths that shape our world.